When Maya moved into her new neighborhood, she felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. It was a fresh start for her, a new home, a new chapter in life. She was a young black woman, eager to make her mark in the community. Her new house was in a quiet suburban neighborhood, and the houses were all neatly lined up with well-kept lawns and flower beds. The peaceful streets made her feel both at ease and out of place. She didn't know anyone in the neighborhood yet, but she was determined to fit in. One sunny afternoon, Maya was outside unpacking the last of her boxes when she noticed her elderly neighbor across the street. He was standing in his yard, slowly watering his plants. Maya had seen him a few times already, but hadn't yet had the chance to introduce herself. He seemed like a quiet older man, white hair, worn clothes, and an air of solitude. He didn't seem to have many visitors. His movements were slow, and he appeared to be in his late 70s, maybe even early 80s. Maya noticed that his house, though tidy, had a bit of wear and tear on it. The fence needed painting, and a couple of steps on the porch looked like they needed fixing. Curious but hesitant, Maya took a deep breath and walked over to him, her heart racing slightly. She had always been the type to be friendly to others, but there was something about this man that made her nervous. Maybe it was his age, or the fact that she didn't know anything about him. As she reached the edge of his yard, she waved shyly. "Hi there," she called out. The man turned around slowly, his face softening as he saw Maya approaching. He gave a small, friendly smile, but there was something in his eyes that suggested he wasn't used to company. He put down the watering can and straightened his back, as if he wasn't sure how to respond. "Hello," he replied, his voice a little hoarse, but warm. Maya smiled back, feeling a little more at ease. "I'm Maya, just moved in across the street," she said, pointing at her new house. "Oh, I see," the man replied, his eyes studying her for a moment. "I'm Mr. Thompson. Nice to meet you." There was a brief silence, but Maya didn't mind. She could tell that Mr. Thompson wasn't the type to talk much. She decided to break the silence with a simple question. "Need any help with those plants?" she asked, gesturing toward his flower beds, which were clearly in need of some care. Mr. Thompson paused, his brow furrowing slightly as if the idea hadn't occurred to him. "Well, I suppose they could use some water. But it's fine. I manage." Maya wasn't ready to leave just yet. "It's no trouble," she said, her voice gentle. "I can help with that, if you'd like. Just a little something to make it easier for you." For a moment, Mr. Thompson hesitated, then gave a nod. "All right then, that would be kind of you." Maya felt a sense of satisfaction as she knelt by the flowers, helping him water them. It was a simple task, but it felt right. As she worked, she noticed how carefully Mr. Thompson watched her, his face softening just a little bit more. There was something about helping him, even in such a small way, that made Maya feel a sense of connection, a sense of belonging. She wasn't sure if he needed a friend, but she was beginning to realize that helping him made her feel less alone in this new place. Over the next few days, Maya found herself thinking about Mr. Thompson more than she expected. Their brief encounter in his garden had been simple, but it had made her feel good. Helping him water his plants wasn't much, but it felt like the beginning of something important. She couldn't help but notice that he often seemed lonely. Every time she walked past his house, she saw him sitting in his rocking chair on the porch, staring out at the street or reading a book, his eyes sometimes distant. He didn't have any visitors, and it made Maya wonder if anyone was there for him, especially since he was so much older. One afternoon, as she was taking a walk around the block, she saw Mr. Thompson outside again. This time, he was trying to carry a heavy bag of soil to the backyard, but it was clear that the bag was too much for him. His steps were slow and unsteady, and Maya immediately felt a tug of concern. She hesitated for a moment, unsure if he would appreciate help, but then decided she would at least offer. She walked up to him with a smile. "Hey, Mr. Thompson. Need a hand with that?" Mr. Thompson looked up, surprised by her sudden appearance. For a second, it looked like he might refuse her help, But then his shoulders slumped in resignation. "I suppose I could use some help," he admitted with a faint chuckle. "This bag's heavier than it looks." Maya reached out to take the bag from him, her strength making the task much easier. "No problem at all," she said. "I'm happy to help." As they walked together toward the backyard, Maya couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in being able to assist him. She noticed the little details. His shoes were worn, and his shirt had a couple of stains on it. It made her think that maybe he didn't get out much, or maybe he didn't have the energy to care for himself like he once did. Once they reached the garden, Maya set the bag down on the grass and looked at the space around them. The backyard was well kept but needed a little attention. The flower beds could use some weeding, and there was a pile of leaves that had gathered in the corner. "You've got a nice garden here," Maya commented. "Do you want me to help you clean up a bit?" Mr. Thompson smiled faintly, a bit surprised at her offer. "Well, I don't usually ask for help. I like to keep things to myself." Maya nodded. "I understand, but I've got a little time. I could help tidy things up if you'd like. It's no trouble." After a moment's thought, Mr. Thompson agreed. "All right, I'll let you give it a try. But no overdoing it." Maya laughed and got to work, pulling out weeds and raking up the leaves. As she worked, she asked him about his life. She could tell he was starting to warm up to her. Little by little, he opened up about his late wife, their life together, and how much he missed her. His voice softened as he spoke about the years they spent traveling and the quiet days they spent at home, gardening together. Listening to him, Maya felt a deep sense of respect for Mr. Thompson. She didn't know much about his past, but it was clear he had lived a rich, full life, even if it felt lonely now. The more they spoke, the more Maya realized that he wasn't just an elderly neighbor to help out. He was a man with stories and experiences that deserved to be heard. After a while, Mr. Thompson finally spoke again. "Thank you, Maya. It's good to have someone around. I've been on my own for a long time." Maya smiled. "It's my pleasure. I'm glad I could help." As they finished up, Maya felt a new connection forming between them. It was more than just helping out with chores. It was about offering companionship, something that meant more than anything to both of them. This part continues the development of their relationship, showing how simple acts of kindness lead to a deeper connection. Let me know if you need any changes. As the weeks passed, Maya continued to visit Mr. Thompson. Their friendship grew steadily, and what had begun as simple acts of kindness soon became regular interactions. Every time she stopped by, she found more reasons to care for him. Sometimes it was helping him with his garden or fixing things around the house that he struggled with. Other times, it was just sitting with him, talking about her day or listening to his stories. Each visit brought them closer, and Maya began to look forward to their time together. Mr. Thompson, once a man of few words, started opening up more. He would tell Maya stories about his younger days, his adventures with his wife, and the lessons he had learned throughout his life. Maya could tell he had lived a full, rich life, filled with love, challenges, and wisdom. Despite his loneliness, he had a quiet strength about him that drew her in. One afternoon, Maya noticed that he seemed a bit off. He wasn't his usual self, and there was a sadness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. She sat down beside him on the porch, concerned. "Mr. Thompson, are you all right?" she asked softly, her voice filled with care. He sighed, looking out at the street as if searching for words. "I'm just feeling a bit tired, I guess. I've been thinking a lot lately about the past, and it just gets hard sometimes. You know, losing someone you love." Maya didn't say anything at first. She didn't want to interrupt him, but she understood. Losing someone was never easy. She gently placed a hand on his shoulder, offering comfort without words. "I understand," she said, her voice gentle. "It's not easy to keep going after someone you love is gone. But you don't have to go through it alone, Mr. Thompson." He looked at her with surprise, and for a moment, it seemed like he was going to say something but then paused. "I've been alone for so long, Maya. Sometimes I forget what it feels like to have someone care." Maya's heart ached at his words. She didn't know what it felt like to lose a spouse, but she knew what it felt like to be cared for. It was something she didn't take for granted. "You don't have to feel alone," she said, her voice steady. "I'm here for you. You've been there for me too, in your own way. And that's something I'll never forget." Mr. Thompson smiled faintly, his eyes softening. "Thank you, Maya. I didn't expect to find someone like you in this quiet neighborhood." Maya smiled back, feeling a warmth in her chest. "I'm glad we met. I never expected to make a friend like you either." As the days went on, Maya continued to visit regularly, and with each visit, their bond deepened. She started noticing the little things that mattered to him. The way he smiled when she brought him his favorite homemade cookies, or the way he always asked about her family, showing genuine interest in her life. In return, Maya learned more about Mr. Thompson's past, his love for painting, his travels with his wife, and his love for reading books about history. She also learned about his struggles, like the difficulty of getting older and feeling left behind by the world around him. One day, as they were sitting on his porch, Mr. Thompson turned to her with a thoughtful expression. "I used to think that old age meant you were done, that you had no more purpose," he said quietly. "But you've shown me that it's never too late to connect with others." Maya smiled, touched by his words. "It's never too late, Mr. Thompson. You've taught me a lot too." Their friendship had grown into something truly special, something that went beyond neighborly kindness. It was a bond that neither of them had expected, but one that both of them cherished deeply. This part continues the development of their emotional connection and explores their deeper conversations, focusing on the growing bond between them. Let me know if you need any changes. One chilly winter morning, Maya woke up to a strange feeling. The sky was overcast, and a cold wind swept through the neighborhood, making everything feel a little quieter than usual. As she sipped her coffee, she noticed the heavy snow beginning to fall. Her mind wandered to Mr. Thompson. She hadn't seen him the day before, and she wondered if he was feeling all right. Winter could be hard on older people, especially those who lived alone. She decided she would visit him later in the day to check on him. When Maya arrived at Mr. Thompson's house, she noticed the porch light was on, but there was no sign of him. She knocked gently on the door, but there was no answer. Frowning, she tried the doorbell, but still nothing. That wasn't like him at all. Maya's concern grew. She'd been there for him countless times, but now it felt like something was off. Without waiting any longer, Maya made her way around the back of the house. She knocked on the kitchen window, hoping to catch his attention. Still, no response. Her worry turned into action, and without thinking twice, she opened the back door and stepped inside. "Mr. Thompson," she called softly, her voice echoing in the quiet house. There was no answer, but she could hear faint shuffling sounds coming from the living room. Her heart raced as she followed the noise and found Mr. Thompson sitting on his couch, holding his side. His face was pale, and there was a cold sweat on his forehead. He looked up at her, startled, but tried to smile. "Oh, Maya, I didn't hear you come in," he said, his voice weak. Maya rushed over to him, her worry now turning into full concern. "Mr. Thompson, what happened? Are you okay?" "I'm fine, just a little dizzy," he replied, though his voice trembled slightly. "I guess I've been feeling off for a while, but I didn't want to bother anyone." Maya sat beside him, her hand gently resting on his arm. "You're not bothering anyone, Mr. Thompson. You should have told me sooner." "I didn't want to worry you," he said softly, his eyes looking tired. "I guess I'm just getting old, that's all." Maya shook her head. "It's not about getting old, Mr. Thompson. Everyone needs help sometimes. I'm here for you, just like you've been here for me." He looked at her, his eyes softening. "I didn't want to be a burden, but I guess you're right, Maya. I'm lucky to have you around." Maya smiled and helped him sit up straighter. "You're not a burden at all. You're my friend, and friends help each other." After a moment, she stood up. "I'll call a doctor to come over and check on you, and I'll stay with you until they arrive." Mr. Thompson didn't argue, though he seemed reluctant. He'd never wanted to admit he needed help, but today he was grateful for it. Maya stayed with him, keeping him company and reassuring him that everything would be all right. As they waited for the doctor, Maya took the time to sit and talk with him, keeping him distracted from his discomfort. She knew he appreciated the company, even if he didn't always say it. They spoke about the books he loved to read and the places he wished he had visited when he was younger. The doctor arrived soon after, and Maya helped Mr. Thompson get the care he needed. As she watched the doctor check his vitals, she promised herself that she would keep a closer eye on him from now on. No one should have to face illness alone. This part focuses on Maya's care for Mr. Thompson during a health scare, highlighting their growing bond and her commitment to looking out for him. Let me know if you need any changes. As the days passed, Mr. Thompson slowly began to recover, thanks to the doctor's care and the warmth of Maya's company. But even though the doctor had assured him that everything was going to be fine, there was still a lingering worry in Maya's mind. She could tell that something wasn't quite the same with Mr. Thompson, even though he was trying his best to put on a brave face. He had always been independent, but now there was a quiet vulnerability to him that made Maya even more determined to help. Maya made it a point to check in on him every day. Sometimes she would bring him soup or fresh bread from the local bakery. Other times she would simply sit with him in the living room, the two of them watching old movies or chatting about the things they had been up to. It wasn't about doing big things, it was about showing him that he wasn't alone. One afternoon, as the snow continued to fall outside, Maya stopped by with a small basket of groceries. When she opened the door, she found Mr. Thompson sitting at his kitchen table, staring down at a stack of old photographs. He didn't notice her at first, so she quietly walked over to him, her footsteps muffled by the carpet. "Mr. Thompson," she asked gently. He looked up, his face soft with emotion. "Oh, Maya, I didn't hear you come in. I was just looking at some old pictures." Maya smiled, setting the basket down on the counter. "Would you mind if I joined you?" "Of course not," he replied, his voice low. He gestured to the chair next to him, inviting her to sit. As Maya sat down beside him, she looked at the photographs scattered across the table. There were pictures of a younger Mr. Thompson with a woman who had to be his wife. They were laughing together in many of the photos, clearly happy in each other's company. Maya could see the love they shared, even in the faded photographs. It was evident that those days held some of the happiest memories of Mr. Thompson's life. "Those are beautiful," Maya said softly, glancing at the pictures. Mr. Thompson smiled wistfully. "That was before everything changed. She was my world, Maya, my heart." Maya could feel the sadness in his words, the weight of the loss that had clearly never left him. She didn't know what to say, so she just placed a hand on his. The gesture seemed to give him a little comfort. "I'm sorry, Mr. Thompson. I can't imagine how hard it must have been to lose her." He nodded, looking down at the photographs for a moment. "It was the hardest thing I've ever had to face, but we had so many good years together. I try to focus on those memories now, instead of the emptiness." Maya squeezed his hand. "You don't have to carry that emptiness alone. I'm here, Mr. Thompson. And I know I can't replace her, but I'd like to help fill your days with good memories again." His eyes met hers, and for a moment, there was a deep understanding between them, a silent promise that no matter what, they would support each other. "Thank you, Maya," he said quietly, his voice full of gratitude. "You've already done more for me than I could have ever asked for." Maya smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. She didn't need anything in return. The quiet moments they shared, the trust that had built between them, these were the things that mattered most. After that day, Maya began to help him even more, making sure he was staying healthy and comfortable. But it wasn't just about taking care of him physically. It was about making sure his heart wasn't lonely anymore. They began to spend more time together, and each day, Maya saw a little more light return to Mr. Thompson's eyes. He was slowly coming back to life, not just because of the care he was getting, but because of the friendship they had found in each other. This part emphasizes Maya's growing role in supporting Mr. Thompson both physically and emotionally, as well as deepening their bond. Let me know if you'd like any adjustments. As the weeks went by, Mr. Thompson's health continued to improve, but something deeper had changed between him and Maya. Their friendship, which had started with simple acts of kindness, had blossomed into something more meaningful. It wasn't just about helping with chores or running errands anymore. It had become about mutual respect, understanding, and a genuine connection that neither of them had expected. Maya could see the difference in Mr. Thompson. His smile had become a little brighter, his steps a little more confident. He no longer looked so weighed down by the past, though the pain of his loss would always be there. But he had found a new source of comfort in her presence. And for Maya, spending time with him had become something she cherished deeply. She had moved to the neighborhood to start a new chapter in her life, but in a way, she had found a new purpose in helping him. One evening, as they sat together on the porch, sipping hot tea to ward off the chill of the evening air, Mr. Thompson turned to Maya with a thoughtful look. "I've been meaning to thank you properly for everything," he said quietly, his voice filled with sincerity. "I don't think I could ever express how much your kindness has meant to me." Maya smiled, not knowing what to say. "You don't need to thank me, Mr. Thompson. I'm just glad I can be here for you." He shook his head, as if he couldn't accept her humility. "You've done more than I could ever have asked. When my wife passed, I thought that was it for me. I thought I would just fade away into the background of life, forgotten. But then you came along." Maya felt a lump form in her throat at his words. She hadn't realized how much he had been struggling, how lonely he had felt. He had always been so independent, never asking for help, always trying to maintain his dignity. But now he was finally letting go of some of that pride, allowing himself to be cared for and supported. "I didn't know you were feeling that way," Maya said softly, her voice full of compassion. "But I'm glad I could make a difference, and I want you to know I'm not going anywhere." For a moment, there was silence between them. The world around them seemed to pause, as if the gravity of the moment was too much to ignore. Mr. Thompson looked at her with such gratitude that it almost took her breath away. "You've given me something I didn't think I would ever have again, Maya," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Hope. You've made me feel like there's still a reason to keep going, a reason to look forward to tomorrow." Maya didn't know how to respond to that, so she simply reached over and took his hand, squeezing it gently. There were no words needed. They both understood the depth of their bond. It wasn't just about taking care of each other. It was about healing, about finding solace in one another's company. As the days grew longer and the seasons began to change, Maya continued to visit Mr. Thompson. Their routine had become a comforting part of both their lives. She would bring him his favorite books to read, help him with small tasks around the house, and sit with him as they watched the world go by. Sometimes, they would talk for hours about everything and nothing at all. Other times, they would just enjoy the peaceful silence, knowing they were not alone. Maya had started to feel like a part of his family. She had become someone he could rely on, someone who saw him for more than just his age or his past. And in return, Mr. Thompson had become a steady presence in her life, a reminder of the importance of kindness, of caring for those who are often overlooked. It wasn't just about looking out for each other. It was about the way they had both helped each other heal. Maya had found a new kind of family in him, and in that simple connection, they had both discovered something worth holding on to. This part delves deeper into their emotional connection, highlighting the healing power of their friendship and the comfort they provide for each other. Let me know if you'd like any changes. The bond between Maya and Mr. Thompson had grown stronger with each passing day, and it was now something neither of them could imagine living without. Their days were filled with simple joys, sharing quiet afternoons, reminiscing about the past, and enjoying each other's company without the need for words. But the moments they spent together were more than just small acts of kindness or routine visits. They were the foundation of a deep, meaningful friendship that had filled the gaps in both their lives. One sunny afternoon, as Maya helped Mr. Thompson trim the hedges in his front yard, she couldn't help but notice how much more at ease he seemed. He wasn't as slow or hesitant as before. His movements had become more deliberate, his smile wider, and his voice stronger. It was clear that the time they had spent together had done wonders for his spirit. She felt proud of how far they had come, both individually and as friends. But she also knew that Mr. Thompson's journey was not over. There was still so much life left to live, and she was determined to be there for him every step of the way. As they finished up in the yard, Mr. Thompson paused for a moment, looking at Maya with a thoughtful expression. "You know, Maya," he said, his voice tinged with a sense of deep appreciation, "when you first moved in, I never expected this. I never expected to find someone who cared so much, someone who would actually stick around." Maya smiled warmly, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for him as well. "I never expected this either," she admitted. "I came here to start fresh, and I found something even more meaningful. I'm just happy that I could be here for you." Mr. Thompson's eyes softened, and for the first time, he seemed to truly understand the gift their friendship had become. He had been isolated for so long, convinced that his days of connection were behind him. But Maya had shown him otherwise. She had reminded him that no matter how much time had passed, there was always room for new relationships, for new beginnings. Later that evening, as they sat on his porch watching the sunset, Mr. Thompson turned to Maya once more. "I don't think I've ever thanked you properly for all you've done," he said, his voice quiet but full of emotion. "You've been like a daughter to me." Maya's heart swelled at his words, and she felt a lump form in her throat. "You don't have to thank me, Mr. Thompson. I'm just doing what anyone would do for a friend." He shook his head, a look of sincerity in his eyes. "No, it's more than that. You've brought life back into this old house. You've brought joy back into my days. And for that, I'm truly grateful." Maya could feel the weight of his words, and she couldn't help but smile. It was the kind of gratitude that went beyond what anyone could express with words. It was the kind of gratitude that was shared through actions, through the simple act of being there for someone when they needed it most. In the weeks that followed, their routine continued. Maya would come over, often with something homemade to share, and they would spend time talking, laughing, or simply enjoying the quiet moments of companionship. What had started as a simple neighborly gesture had turned into something beautiful, something neither of them could have anticipated. They were no longer just two people living on the same street. They had become a family of sorts, bound together by kindness, respect, and an unspoken understanding. As Maya sat beside Mr. Thompson, watching the sun dip below the horizon, she realized just how much their friendship had shaped her. She had come into his life as a stranger, but now she was someone he trusted, someone he could rely on. And in return, she had found someone who cared for her in a way that was unlike anything she had experienced before. It was a bond that would last, and one that neither of them would ever take for granted. This part focuses on the growth of their relationship and the deep appreciation they have for each other. It emphasizes the meaningful and life-changing impact of their friendship. Let me know if you'd like any changes. As the seasons continued to change, Maya and Mr. Thompson's bond only deepened. What had started as a simple act of kindness had turned into a meaningful and irreplaceable connection. Their friendship had become a constant source of joy, not just for Mr. Thompson, but for Maya as well. It was a relationship that neither of them had expected but both cherished deeply. They had found something special in each other, and that was something worth holding on to. One warm spring afternoon, as Maya arrived at Mr. Thompson's house with a basket of fresh fruit and flowers, she couldn't help but notice how much the place had changed. His yard, once overgrown and untidy, was now well manicured, and the porch looked inviting with freshly painted steps and colorful flower pots. It was clear that he had been taking care of his home, not just because of his growing strength, but because he had started to enjoy it again. When Maya stepped inside, she was greeted by the familiar, comforting smell of his house. Mr. Thompson was sitting by the window, gazing out at the blooming garden. She could see how peaceful he looked, how content he had become. There was no trace of the sadness that once seemed to weigh so heavily on him. "Hey there, Mr. Thompson," Maya called out as she walked in, her voice full of cheer. He looked up and smiled warmly. "Hello, Maya. It's so good to see you. I was just thinking about how much things have changed over the last few months." Maya sat down next to him, placing the basket of fruit and flowers on the table. "Yeah, things have really changed, haven't they?" she agreed. "I'm glad I could be a part of it." Mr. Thompson looked at her, his eyes filled with gratitude. "You've done more than just help me around the house, Maya. You've given me a reason to look forward to the future. I never thought I'd be able to enjoy these little moments again, until you came into my life." Maya felt her heart swell at his words. She had never expected their friendship to mean so much, but now she couldn't imagine her days without him. "I'm just happy we found each other," she said softly. "You've taught me so much too, Mr. Thompson, like how important it is to make time for the little things, to slow down and appreciate the people around you." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. Maya realized how much she had learned from him, not just about gardening or fixing things around the house, but about life. Mr. Thompson had shown her the power of kindness, the importance of resilience, and how love, whether from family, friends, or even a neighbor, could change everything. "I used to think that I was too old for new beginnings," Mr. Thompson said quietly, breaking the silence. "But you've proved me wrong. Life isn't about age. It's about finding new ways to grow, no matter where you are in life." Maya smiled, feeling deeply moved by his words. "You're never too old for a fresh start, Mr. Thompson. And I'm so glad you're here, still finding new ways to grow. I'm lucky to have you as a friend." Mr. Thompson reached out and took her hand in his, a silent acknowledgement of their bond. "And I'm lucky to have you in my life, Maya. You've made all the difference." As they sat there together, looking out at the garden that had become a symbol of their friendship, Maya felt a deep sense of fulfillment. What started as a small act of kindness had blossomed into something extraordinary. They had both learned the power of compassion, the importance of being there for one another, and how the most unexpected friendships could change lives in the most profound ways. And in that quiet moment, Maya realized that no matter where life took them, they would always have each other. This final part reflects on the lasting impact of their friendship, focusing on the lessons learned and the deep gratitude they both feel for each other. Let me know if you'd like any changes.